Have you ever felt that most climbing media only tells stories about what's happening at the pinnacle of the sport, leaving the stories of everyday climbers untold? I'm Kyle, and I believe that there is a growing group of climbers that wants representation. Welcome to the Climbing Majority Podcast, where I capture the stories, experiences, and lessons of non-professional climbers, guides, and athletes from around the world. Come join me as I dive deep into a more relatable world of climbing. Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Kyle Broxterman, and today we're going to be continuing our conversation with Eric and Matthew Gilbertson. If you missed part one, I highly recommend circling back to listen to it before continuing here, as we'll be jumping right into the middle of our 2-hour conversation. Just in the last 2 weeks, Eric returned from a trip to Colombia with some groundbreaking news. Due to glacial melt, unfortunately, the country's previously recognized highest peak has lost about 50 meters in elevation. And after surveying the region, Eric officially confirmed a new highest point in Colombia. Previously thought to be Pico Colón, but now officially Pico Bolívar, stands at 5,720 meters. Reaching its summit requires an 8-pitch climb, featuring 5.6 M2 WI2 terrain. As always, Eric has documented the entire expedition in a detailed trip report, which you can find linked in our show notes. With this latest achievement, the twins have now collectively summited 146 of the 195 country high points around the world. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a deeper dive into some of the most unique, bizarre, and dangerous experiences they've encountered along their mission to summit all of the country high points. Mountains permanently closed for religious reasons, approaches through active minefields, climbing walls made of just roots and jungle vegetation, and first ascents in the remote Canadian wilderness. This conversation truly showcases the extreme variety of challenges they've faced along the way. As I mentioned before, condensing 146 global mountain ascents into just 2 hours is nearly impossible. But my hope is that this conversation spreads the word about their mission and the incredible accomplishments they've achieved so far. Eric and Matthew Gilbertson are truly modern-day explorers in every sense of the word. So, without further delay, let's dive into part 2 of my conversation with Eric and Matthew Gilbertson.
I guess, Matt, I'm interested in hearing some of your perspective. So what trip has been the most meaningful to you thus far? Like what mountain summit?
One of the trips I really liked with Amanda was Namibia High Point. It's way out there in the desert, kind of off by itself. You get to hike through this crazy terrain. You get to hike by these 3,000-year-old cave paintings. You hike in this area that doesn't get rain, some years, and so we found like a watering hole that still had water in it, even though it hadn't rained for 2 years, and we're able to fill up there. Yeah, that was a special one. One of the ones that I really like that Eric and I have done together is the Mongolia High Point. It's way out there, Western Mongolia, kind of out in the middle of nowhere area that not too many people get to go to. It's kind of like Mount Rainier. It's not really that high or that technical, but you get to see this terrain that is just totally out of this world. These big giant plateaus at high altitude that just stretch for miles and miles and miles. We're in an old kind of Russian, old Soviet era ambulance, and we're kind of driving through rivers. At the trailhead, there's camels. There's like, I think there were yaks up there too. There's yurts. There's, we got to eat fresh cooked marmot when we got down from the peak. We got to also do a little bit of pack rafting afterwards. Got to stay with a family at their home and, got to have a good local experience. And so that was, I think, one of my favorite peaks that Eric and I have done together.
Nice.
Not that challenging, but a lot of aspects of it that were a lot of fun.
It sounds like it's about the adventure and the experience for you and the exploration. Yep. Do you have like a specific, you've traveled the world, and like I have like my Google Earth or my Google Maps, and I have like pins all over the earth of like where I want to go with the little green flags. And like sometimes I look at it and I'm just depressed because I'm just like, I'm never going to be able to do this in my life. But we try, the goal is to set it as high as possible, and maybe we achieve it, maybe we get halfway. But like, is there a particular part of the world or a landscape that is just like super captivating for you? Like, some people talk about Nepal, maybe Africa. Like, is there a landscape, a topography, a mountain aspect of the earth that is just like, wow, like this place really speaks to me?
Yeah, I think for me it's Iceland for sure. There's such a diversity of landscapes there. There's glaciers, there's black sandy beaches with icebergs washed ashore. There's lava, there's waterfalls, there's green fields of like lavender as far as the eye can see. It's just so many different types of scenery there, Iceland, and it's very hospitable, but at the same time it's also kind of foreign. Like the language is so different, all the street signs are so different. But it's Eric and I did a bike trip there where we biked about 150 miles or so to the high point. So we got to see a good portion of the country on our way to the mountain. And when we got to the summit, we kind of hiked through the clouds, and about the last maybe 100 feet was above the clouds when we got to the summit. So you could look basically in every direction, it's all clouds. So we're kind of the only part of the entire island of Iceland that was in the sun.
Wow. Like a really sick, perfect inversion layer.
Yeah.
That's awesome. How about you, Eric? Do you have like a specific part of the world that has just like completely inspired you and captivated you?
Yeah, my favorite's Northwest Territories in Canada. So this one particular area, Mount Nirvana, in the Ragged Range. It's like 30 miles south of Circuit of the Unclimbables, but no one ever goes there, and it's really hard to get to. But it's kind of like Yosemite Valley, but plopped in the middle of the wilderness and like 50 miles from the nearest road, and completely like unexplored and unclimbed. So I've made 3 expeditions in there. I climbed the mountain twice. It's just so fun. There's like this, it's like this L capsized wall on one side, like many thousand feet tall. Did like a 30 pitch rock climb up it.
Damn.
And like I kind of like trips where you need many different modes of transportation. So I did it without any planes. So a Greyhound bus from my house, and then truck to this old mine. And then we packrafted down this river a couple days, bushwhacking, crossing glaciers. Then it's like a 20-30 pitch rock climb, then go all the way back out. But it's so remote in there. Like the animals there have never seen people. I'll come up to these caribou and they're just like acting confused. They don't know what to do. They like kind of approach me. They don't know what I am.
Wow. Was it an established rock climb? Was it a FA?
Oh no.
It was an FA?
First ascent.
Wow.
Yeah, the whole face had never been climbed.
Holy hell, that's so cool.
You could probably put like 50 routes on there.
Wow. Who did you climb it with?
2 climbing partners from MIT, Dave and Susan. They were helping. They kind of taught us rock climbing when we were in undergrad.
Wow, that's so sick. Is this documented anywhere? Like,
oh yeah, it's in the American Alpine Journal.
Okay, sick. Did you win the Pilt d'Or?
Or no? I don't think they're gonna give it for rock climbing.
Yeah, no. Wow, that's so cool. That's super cool. That's really rad. Yeah, the Cirque of the Unclimbables has always been like it's one of those green flags I have on my map, but it's cool to hear that there's a place just like it, just around the corner.
Yeah, but a lot harder to get to.
Yeah.
I mean, Cirque of the Unclimbables, you can take a float plane into this lake nearby. And the terrain's well, from what I've seen, it's kind of similar terrain, but this place near Mount Nirvana is just completely unexplored.
Wow.
So everything is unclimbed. It's kind of cool.
How is the rock? Bulletproof?
Oh, the rock's great. It's good granite.
Yeah.
The problem is the weather, and you'll get the same thing in Cirque of the Unclimbables. You'll get like you might have a 36-hour weather window every 5 days or so. So summit day is always a mega push. Like there's a 40-hour push without sleeping.
Holy hell.
Get up there, get down.
Wow.
But it's far enough north if you're there early enough in season that you kind of get light all day and all night.
Rappelling, or are you able to like down climb off the backside?
Oh no. The easiest route is like a 22 pitch 5.7 route. I've done that one. But the one we did was like 30 pitch 5.9. So we had like 3 full treadracks, and we left most of the gear on the mountain just for wrap anchors.
Holy hell, no way. Wow. Was that funded by like AAC or?
Oh no, it was just
$100 every time you drop an anchor.
Well, my partners, they climb so much. They have A, B, C, D team, and like the C team is just booty gear, and so that's the gear we leave on the mountain.
Wow. Okay. Super cool. Just stacked with gear. I love it.
I mean, we try to leave nuts and slings when we can, but sometimes it's just a 2-cam anchor is all you can do. It's kind of expensive.
It is expensive. You should reach out to Smiley Project. Have you heard about him in Jackson Hole? Smiley Guides or?
Are you doing the 50 classics or just someone else?
No, he's a guide, and he's like, take a picture of your bail anchor and I'll pay for your gear.
Oh, that's a good project.
So
people like leave a safe anchor.
Exactly. Yeah. So people aren't, pressured to wrap off a single nut or a single cam or like a shitty horn. And so, yeah, he's like, take a picture of your bail anchor, prove that you used it, and I'll pay for the anchor essentially. So
wow.
You guys should have documented that whole thing and really give him a run for his money.
Wow, he'd have to double.
Yeah.
Wonder if he'd keep doing that.
Yeah, after one project, he's like, that's it, man, I'm out. I've already, I had to replace 30 anchors. I think I'm out of budget now. Wow, that's really cool, man. I mean, that's crazy. Like, that's a whole another story. It's like you've got this whole project going on that would be this lifetime project, and now you're doing FAs in like unexplored areas. Is that like another passion project of yours? Did you just get looped into that because that was like your friend's passion, or are you planning to do more of that?
That was actually for another high pointing project. For the high points of Canada, all the provinces and territories. And this mountain, we'd seen that it had been climbed by like 2 routes, but then on the map it looked like this enormous face on the like the southwest face. That the intriguing thing was there was one trip report from 1965 where these guys on the first descent, they walked by it and all they said was, it looked more than we were prepared for, and they kept going. And we're like, whoa, that sounds like a fun project. No beta, no pictures, nothing. We just show up there with like 5 weeks of supplies and just try to figure it out. And we actually, the first expedition, we spent like 5 weeks and we couldn't get up it. We tried all kinds of different routes. We were like fixing lines, had like a little ledge halfway up. We had an advanced base camp. We got up about like, it looked like about 2 pitches below the summit ridge. And it was just a blank face. What looked like a crack from like binoculars from a distance was actually just nothing. It was kind of like a corner, but there was no crack in there.
Wow.
So we couldn't do anything. So I had to bail. And then the next year I went back in and we did the route that had been done before, the 20-something pitch route, the 5-7. So because I wanted to get the top. Then the next year we came back in, we wanted to climb this face that was unclimbed. So that was like another 5 weeks there. Very last weather window. Well, we got up like 20 pitches on the first attempt, and then like the weather crapped out and we bailed. But we left 20 pitches of wrap anchors. So the last weather window possible, we had that route dialed. The first 20 pitches, just swinging leads, and we already had our wrap anchor set up. So then that was like 40-hour pitch and 40-hour push, and we just barely got it.
Wow. What'd you name the route?
I'm not really good at naming.
Is it not named?
I think we just gave it our last names, Custer Gilbertson.
Okay. All right. The Custer Gilbertson route.
Maybe we're supposed to name it. I feel like crags, you name routes. It seems like on the Alpine, you kind of just give it to people's names. I'm not sure what the precedent is.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. Wow. That's so crazy. I didn't even know I was going to go down that tangent.
Not a country high point, though.
Yeah. Still, though, you're like, you're segmenting it into like, each segmented area too. It's like high points within this area, high points globally, high points, it's such an interesting way to dive after goals as a climber and mix like all these passions together. It's pretty sweet. What about back to like the country high points? What is the most logistically challenging mountain to get to? Whether it be religious, political, like which is the one that's the biggest question mark that you haven't done yet? And you're just like, I have no idea how this is going to happen.
Myanmar, Eric? No, it's definitely Bhutan. Ganga Punsum, the highest unclimbed mountain in the world.
Oh, it's unclimbed.
So all mountains above like 6,000 meters or 5,000 meters in Bhutan are closed for religious reasons.
Oh.
They were open in like the 80s though. maybe early 90s. So teams tried it. It's like this 6,000 meter peak, and no one made it. But now it's closed. So no one knows. Big question mark. Is it ever going to open? Who knows?
Do you know of anybody that's trying to pirate it at all?
I haven't heard of anything. It is on the China border, so there was a Japanese team that got permission from China back in the 90s.
Wow.
But once they got close, then I think Bhutan wasn't happy and China revoked permission.
Interesting. Is there like, obviously, like I'm not trying to advocate for breaking religious conduct on mountains, but like, what would it look like if you did? Like, is there an army that would like string you up and make you disappear? Or like, you know, what are the implications of somebody actually trying to break that kind of religious conduct? Do you know?
Maybe on the China side. I'm not sure on the Bhutan side. I wouldn't want to test it.
Probably
I would
be hard to
like,
even get close, given like
with
much,
all your climbing gear. They're like,
and how prepared you need to be, and how you need to hire drivers to get you close, and they'd be asking questions. I don't think you could really sneak up that one.
do you know the reasons behind the religious closure? Do you know like the spiritual implications of the mountain themselves?
I'm
No.
not sure of the details.
Mm.
I don't like. I'm confused why it was open in the past, but not
now.
Which I don't know what changed.
Interesting. And so that one is just like straight up question mark. It's going to have to, something internal in the country is going to have to change to allow especially Westerners to be on top of those mountains.
You know, that's the case for many other countries. Like North Korea, high point there is pretty easy. We've looked into it, but obviously nowadays it's a no-go.
But they have opened, I think in December, they're going to start opening up tourism specifically on Pictou, the North Korea high point.
Would you feel safe going in there even if it was like open for tourism?
Well, in 2013, we were pretty close to going. It was like Americans were going, climbing the mountain, no problem.
Wow.
So I think political situations kind of go back and forth. Sometimes they're safe, sometimes they're not. So if a window opens, you got to jump on it and get it.
Political and weather windows at the same time. It's messy.
Yeah, we've gotten kind of, lucky with some countries like Cuba, for example. We're able to do that when politically it was really easy to go there. And, nowadays it's not quite as easy. So yeah, you have to be strategic in when you visit.
Interesting.
Sometimes you have to be lucky. Like in Sri Lanka, the top is like a military communications like outpost and with guards and fences. Matthew went there and he had a friendly guard and he got in. And I went and the guard said no permission. I spent 3 days there waiting around, trying, nope, no permission.
Wow.
So I just got unlucky.
And then we have the inverse of that for Qatar. Eric went there and he was able to just drive right onto the peak, right onto the summit.
That was the easiest country high point in the whole world. I could drive to the top and stick my foot out the window while sitting out the door, while sitting on the seat and touch the high point. Cannot get easier. But then now it's like the hardest in the world.
Yeah. So when I was there was just a gate and a guard, and he didn't know much English, but he could say no. And there's not really anything I could do.
Wow. Did you get through the gate?
No.
No. Oh, he just said no?
Got to the gate. I had a printout in Arabic of what I was trying to say. Like, I'm a peak bagger. I'm trying to get to the top.
Yeah.
Showed it to him. He wasn't interested in working with me at all on it.
It's like an old 90s video game, right? It's like the guard at the gate, all he can say is no, and you got to find like the way to get past him, some sneaky bird in a tree that's like telling you the secret code or whatever.
Yeah, we couldn't find that. Maybe next.
Oh, bummer. What about like, you hear the story of Tommy Caldwell and how like he had the whole terrorist situation and the hostage. Like, have you guys ever run into a situation like that in some of the more remote like areas of Pakistan or Kyrgyzstan? Like, have you had any run-ins with like local terrorist communities or local militia or anything like that?
We haven't had any problems. I mean, I've been in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, and Afghanistan was probably maybe the riskiest. When I went in 2019, the Taliban were still in control, but they were not in control of this one little region called the Wakhan Corridor because the locals wouldn't let the Taliban in. So we crossed into that area from Tajikistan, and then we climbed the Afghanistan high point.
Nice.
The route up was landmined though, so we
Oh
had
my
to be very
God.
careful. We hired locals in the nearby village. They knew the safe way, and there was this trail to follow, and we got to this field where we were supposed to camp, and there were rocks along the trail. And I put my tent on one side, just like right next to the rocks, like 3 feet away. And the porter came up, and he knew 2 words of English, no and boom. And so he said, no, boom. I
Oh,
was like, no, boom. And then I pointed to the other side, and he said, okay.
damn. So you put your tent on a landmine?
No, it was in a field that they didn't know was safe.
Oh,
And so we camped on the other side. And that night, one of the donkeys got loose and was running around that field. So the porter, he had to get it. So he was hopping rock to rock very carefully, not touching any ground.
holy
And
shit.
somehow he got the donkey.
Wow. I thought for sure that was going to be like donkey exploded, end of story.
So when we were hiking back after like 3 weeks, there was this cow that had stepped on one, and we saw its carcass nearby.
Oh my God.
So you definitely want to go exactly where the locals say to go.
Imagine living in a world like that where you're like, oh yeah, I've got landmines in my backyard and I've got to take this secret path to get through to the fucking village or whatever. That's pretty nuts.
That's how it was in Nicaragua, actually. We had to hire a guide, and we followed directly behind him, and he knew the safe way through the jungle, avoiding landmines.
Wow. So landmines in a jungle, that's even more sus. It's wild. So I want to, that's actually a great segue. I'm interested in, so I saw this picture of you guys vertical bushwhacking. I think that's how you guys put it. And I was just like, what the fuck are these guys doing? You're like on a cliffside. There's no rocks. It's just jungle bush. And you guys are climbing without ropes. Like, talk to me about, I think, which country, which was it? St. Vincent. St. Vincent. Yeah. So what the hell was that? Did you guys plan for that? Like, you know, how did you guys find yourself in that situation, and how was it as dangerous and desperate as it looked?
I would say this is a case. These kind of mountains come up a lot where it's a crater, and a trail will go to one side of the crater rim, but the highest point is actually on the other side.
Of course.
And so all the existing data on this mountain was, oh, just a trail to the top, no problem. And so we get there, and then we look across, and we're like, well, we're not at the top. The top's on the other side. So we had no idea what was the best way to get there. Do we go clockwise or counterclockwise? Well, we just flipped the coin, went one way. And it turned out when we were approaching the summit, it was kind of dangerous because there are these bushes that make the terrain look completely flat. But in reality, there's these deep chasms that are hidden underneath them.
Holy fuck.
So you could fall in like 10 feet if you weren't really careful.
Yeah.
So we get to the base, and it's extremely steep, and there's just these bushes on the face. And if you grab them on the side, you could easily just rip them out. So the only thing you could do was dig down to the roots and like grab a fistful of root with each hand as deep as you can. And then that was like the most secure climbing we could get.
How high did you guys climb like that?
I mean, it wasn't like dead vertical, but it was steep enough you wouldn't want to fall. It was at least a couple 100 feet probably. I don't know, maybe you remember better, Matthew?
Yeah, were you there? Or did you do it with him?
Yeah, we were right behind you. I can't remember who was in front. Yeah, I thought maybe like 100, 200 feet, and then it kind of eased up. Then we got to the top, and then we noticed that you could kind of hike along the rim back down a more gentle route, and that worked. But it turns out within like the last year or two, there was a volcanic eruption there. And it completely reshaped the whole landscape. So who knows what the route's like now.
So you gotta go.
One
you
of
gotta
my
go back.
friends has been there. Serge, he went there like in this past spring. He took a couple attempts. So he knew that the route we took up was not a good one. But he said the summit is unchanged. He tried to take our descent route, but apparently it erupted and there was some big outflow that just kind of wiped out the crater in there, turned into a cliff.
Interesting.
So he made 2 trips, and the second one he got up. He said it was challenging, but somehow he made it.
But the high point you guys established is the same. Just getting there is different.
Yeah, that's what he said. It's the same high point, so we don't have to like
Go back.
Well, one thing we say is our definition of the high point is the highest point. If you reach the highest point on the day you're there, then you can count it.
Okay.
So you can't predict that a mountain's going to change in the future. Like Sweden, when we went there, south peak of Kebnekaise was the high point, but now it's melted down. So if like a volcano erupts, well, I mean, maybe you'll go back there anyway. But some people ask, "Oh, do you have to go back?" I feel like you can't predict how mountains are going to change in the future.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like Mount Cook, apparently in the 90s used to be much easier, but then there was this huge rock slide, like the summit kind of like fell off, and now you have this really difficult summit ridge.
Jeez. Yeah. No.
So I wouldn't want to tell someone back then, "Oh no, you got to go back now. It's harder, but it's changed, so you got to go back."
Yeah.
That wouldn't be
Hey,
very
if
nice.
the elevation of the top changed significantly, it sounds like you got to go back.
I don't want to tell anyone that.
What about some other unfinished attempts? Sounds like Chad and Ethiopia are also some unfinished ones. Are those remarkable stories or just kind of flops?
Chad, we went in there in N'Djamena, the capital, and you need to get this special document to leave the town to go into the outskirts. And we thought we had everything arranged, but we were waiting like 5 days, 6 days. The right officials were not in town, and they didn't have any deputies to sign for it. And so we started to change plans. After that amount of time, we couldn't do it.
Wow.
So we got to go back and kind of plan it better.
It makes you have respect for the amount of freedom we have out here to just go wherever the hell we want for the most part. It seems like there's a lot of areas in other countries that are pretty locked down, and I gripe about having to get a permit for Mount Whitney, but it seems like there's other areas that are extremely locked down. Do you see, like, why do you think these other countries have like such restrictive areas? Is it just for foreigners and tourists, or is it just regulated for specific reasons?
For Chad, there's like rebel activity in the north. And there's a lot of gold mining up there that the government can't really control. So it's kind of like Wild West. And I think that's why they want to regulate it.
Just make sure you don't go and kill yourself out there,
Right.
essentially. Yeah.
There's other red tape. The most red tape I've ever experienced is Greenland, actually.
Really?
I did an expedition this summer. Me and another partner, we snow kited across. It was like 2-month expedition, like 1,500 miles.
Wow.
And it takes 3 months to get the permit. That's the most logistically complicated. You need all kinds of different insurances, all bank guarantees, SAR, medevac.
Why can't you just go and risk your life and do what the hell you want?
I think Greenland doesn't want to be responsible for paying to fly some helicopter in there and get you. Super expensive.
Okay. So it's like a rescue insurance, essentially. Like you're securing your safe exit if shit hits the fan.
Right.
Okay.
Like one insurance covers you if you get hurt. One insurance covers you if you just like are incommunicado for like no one knows where you are and they have to go find you. And one covers you if you just kind of do something stupid and it's not medical related. You just like ran out of food or something and need that. You need insurance for all those.
How much did that cost?
I mean, the permit itself was like $500, but it like takes 3 months and you don't know if you're going to get it or not.
Wow. Is it like a
then
lot
on either end of the trip?
Uh-huh.
I thought like a 5-day delay in Chad was a big deal. We were delayed like 16 days getting in because we had to wait for sea ice to clear to boat to the coast.
This was happening when I was reaching out to you in the first place, right?
Oh yeah. And then delayed 17 days getting out just because the planes never came into this town. It's the hardest town in the world to get out of, I think.
Jeez. Was there a high point you were going after out there, or was this just a expedition?
It was kind of training for future high points that I want to snow kite into. We did some climbing on the west coast. We did 4 unclimbed peaks that we kited into.
Wow. You just keep throwing these like little like small statements like, oh yeah, we just did 4 unclimbed peaks over here, and we just did a couple unclimbed peaks over here. You're very nonchalant about your achievements here. Like, how do you see like these things you're doing in the climbing world? Like, do you see them as notable, or are you just kind of like, oh, this is just what I do? Like, how do you kind of wrap your head around the things that you do? Because I think a lot of people these days search for clout, or they search for recognition. We search for, like recognition for our achievements and the things that we do. And yeah, I don't know if you know this, but I came across both of you guys because I posted a Reddit post and I said, you know, who are the most unrecognized climbers out there in the world achieving the coolest things right now? Like, whose stories aren't being told? And like, your guys' name came up. Like, people who knew you saw this post on Reddit and threw your name into the hat. And that's why I found you guys. So like, you know, what is it about your, and this, you know, this question goes to both of you, because I think you both have achieved some amazing things traveling around the world and reaching these high points that a lot of people probably spend a lot of their life trying to do. Like, what's your approach? Like, you know, is there any part of you that searches for recognition? Like, is it just because you have you have your website, you know, is that just a journal for yourself? Like, how have you conceptualized like sharing these things with the world and how that relates to like your ego and your passion? I guess, yeah, Eric, and we'll go to Matthew.
Oh, you want me to start?
Yeah.
I think the website's kind of like a journal, and I think I definitely benefit from reading beta from other climbers for mountains. So I kind of feel like I want to put all the beta that I learn out there, and then other climbers can learn from that, and then I can make connections with other climbers. Then maybe they can be partners on future trips. I don't really try to do anything for recognition. It's kind of like we have this big project, and I really want to like finish this goal of climbing country high points. And kind of like along the way, it kind of lends itself to all these interesting expeditions, like going to Uzbekistan and climbing this unclimbed peak that was the high point. It wasn't necessarily just to like climb an unclimbed peak, but it was to get to the highest point. But a side effect was this really interesting expedition that this mountain that had no beta, and we found this new route up it. And like for Greenland, it's more like these are all like little stepping stones toward the main goal of the country high points. Like if I can do a snow kite expedition in Greenland, then I can use this skill for other trips, country high points that might require a snow kite approach.
But I think for me, like I was kind of saying earlier, there's a lot of reasons. There's, you know, personal achievement, like setting a goal, accomplishing it, like getting to kind of test myself, my physical abilities. You know, it gives me a lot of pride to get to the top of a mountain after, you know, a lot of planning, and just being able to see parts of the world that I wouldn't have any excuse to see otherwise. And those are some of the top reasons for me.
Nice. Do you have a specific mountain like that's on the list for you that's like, this is like, before I die, you know, obviously your goal is to achieve all of them, but like, is there a specific one, Matthew, where you're just like, this is the one that I like got my eyes on right now? Like, I really want to make this happen.
For now, I definitely like to get the kids up some high points. So I've been saving Croatia for that for a while now. That one's pretty easy.
Nice.
And then that help. If we do Austria, then Croatia will be the last one for me in Europe. So that one's pretty special.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. How old are your kids right now?
You know, 2 and 5.
2 and 5. You gonna just lug them up in a backpack?
Yeah, that's right.
That's cool.
Maybe the 5-year-old, she can hike part of it.
Hell yeah. That's awesome, man. So it's like family is like a big focus for you right now in terms of like your life trajectory, especially for the early years of the kids, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like to get them into it, at least.
Nice.
Into hiking and outdoorsy things.
Yeah. And hey, maybe they'll be the ones that have to carry on the legacy, right? You'll be like, all right, like Myanmar and North Korea, like if I don't make it, like you've got to finish the objective. You got to get to these countries that, you know, I have not been able to go to. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe.
Eric, what's up?
Good.
I was just going to say, Eric, like, what about you? Like, what's on your list, like upcoming? What's the biggest kind of objective that you're like super psyched on and that you're training for?
I'd like to go to Antarctica and use my snow kiting skills.
I was waiting for that one, honestly, with the snow kiting in Greenland. I was like, I think he's going to say Antarctica.
Yeah, that'd be kind of fun.
Yeah. So what is that?
I'd like to try to do stuff cheap. So if you can not rely on planes, but like snow kiting, you can cover. Some days I did 200 miles in a day, and it was not that. It's definitely achievable. So you can cover huge distances. So that opens up a lot of terrain.
Do you guys listen to Radiolab at all?
Yeah,
Yeah.
once in a while.
Did you listen to the one about Joy? And the guy who was cross country skiing to the center of Antarctica and then back again.
Whoa, I haven't heard that.
He like this. I won't go too far into it, but essentially this guy like it just reminded me of the story. He like goes the same direction in as he does out, and so on the way in, he's taking some of his gear and stashing it along the way, and then so on the way back, he has these stashes to get himself back out. And apparently, like his last stash that he put, the first stash that he made, he had forgotten about it and like got to the stash. And like at first it's, he's like weeks and weeks into this trip. And like he opens the stash and it's like trash, trash, trash. And he's like, oh, it's just trash. And then he like opens up and like it's a candy bar. And like there's this raw audio of him. He's just like, yes, yes. Oh. And then it just like goes completely silent. And then, it's like the whole port of the episode was just like how much joy you can find in like the simple moments, especially when you put yourself so far out there, where like this candy bar was just like life changing for him. But yeah, he was in Antarctica and doing something similar like that. I don't know what the point of that tangent was. It was just an interesting story. I guess I can try to swing it into this conversation at all, like to the topic of like suffering and like putting yourself out there far on the edge. And this will be a question for both of you separately. Matthew, like, have you had like, what's the moment in your life, and maybe this isn't related to these mountain peaks, or maybe it is, where it's like the lowest of the low point, like the most suffering that you've had to endure. What moment was that for you?
Well, I think Everest is all about suffering. I mean, there for like 2 months on the glacier, and you're like, for me, I don't acclimate super well, so I'm just getting weaker and weaker and weaker every day. So finally summit day comes, get up really early, get to the south summit, and the wind is way stronger than expected. Wind chill is 40 below, and hadn't slept for 2 nights, and I'm on oxygen, but still I'm like, kind of my vision's starting to get like a little bit blurry, and I'm feeling like really, really cold. And it was, we actually had gone a lot faster than we had expected. So we got to that point at like 2:30 a.m. So 3 hours until the sun would rise. And I knew that I couldn't just sit there for the next 3 hours waiting to warm up. So I said, I've got a wife and 2 kids. I got to go down. It's just too risky. So that was a really hard decision for me. But I've never second guessed that decision in the last, year and a half since then. I've known it was the right decision. Yeah, and in fact, a couple of the climbers within our company's team like didn't make it, and they actually, they got to about the same point as I did, and they weren't able to get down. So, I'm just really glad that I kind of made that decision. But yeah, that was really hard. Really hard mountain. On the way down, we just basically picked up our gear at Camp 4, kept going down, went all the way past Camp 3, all the way to Camp 2. So it was, pretty much 3 days of no sleep, going, 2/3 of the way, going up almost to the top and 2/3 of the way down. And then on the way down through the Khumbu Icefall, I was probably the most exhausted I've ever been in my life. I remember my hands seemed like they knew what to do, like clipping onto the ropes, but my brain was only like 50% there. Like I wasn't really comprehending things, and I made it through safely, but it was the most kind of exhausted that I've ever been when I got to base camp.
Wow. After you recovered from that like situation, like did you pull any meaning from it at all? Like was there like lessons that you learned, or like purpose that you got from it, or like reflections that you had?
But I think just kind of realizing that the stakes are high on some mountains, and it's not, no peak is worth losing your life over, for sure. There's, like my wife and 2 kids at home, I've got to come back safely to them. Yeah, I always got to keep that in the back of my mind.
Would you say before your family, you were more of a risk taker, and like that moment kind of like made you reel in a little bit, or it was just like the first time where you're just like, wow, like that was pretty close?
I think that was that was definitely the first peak where I've been really conscious that, yeah, I definitely, like, I have to get back no matter what. And like, there's, 2 kids and my wife they're waiting for me. Yeah, so I think that was one of the first times I felt that way on.
Yeah. Eric, how about yourself? Do you have like a striking moment where suffering kind of played a huge role in your life and kind of brought you to the edge?
There's definitely a mountain where I suffered a lot in Poveda. The summit day, like above 7,000 meters, I end up breaking trail the whole way on my own, the whole way up. And I've never been more exhausted than that after I got back. So I think this contributed to my frostbite. So just totally worn out. And in our tent, we tried to save weight, so we didn't bring a vestibule. But up at that elevation, we needed to have some ventilation, have some air so we could breathe. But it was like blowing snow all night. So the snow blows in, gets our sleeping bags wet. So there's no insulation. So we basically don't get any sleep after an exhausting day. And then this little avalanche stuff hits our tent at night, and we just dive out, and I'm trying to dig out with my bare hands. And I said, okay, we got to get down. So I'm exhausted, no sleep, and then my hands are frozen, but we got to get down. And my partner, he lost a crampon, so we had to be super careful getting down. So I'm setting up these V-threads, wrapping down, and not worrying about my hands at all. Just got to get down as fast as possible. So we finally get down to the bottom, and that's when I realized this was probably the most... I was very disappointed in myself because then all my fingers had blisters on them. So I knew I had frostbite. And so I got back to the camp, and we were able to take the next helicopter out the next day, out to Bishkek. And so for the next 3 days, I was basically just sleeping all day in the hotel. I was just completely zapped. And I think the frostbite kind of like zapped me too. And I was just super nervous that, oh man, now I'm going to like have permanent damage. So that was kind of like a low point. But then everything like 100% recovered. So it all is all okay now.
Sounds
lucky.
I'm
like super, super careful now about keeping my hands a lot warmer. I was not very careful then.
How close do you think you were to losing digits? Like minutes? Hours?
I think the biggest problem was that they got really cold and I warmed them up and then they refroze again the next day. So doing all this like complicated rope work, but allowing to get cold. And that cycle, I think, was the bad problem. I think if I had done another cycle like that, it would have been really bad.
Like a freeze-thaw cycle.
Yeah, it was kind of the lowest edge. They weren't black, but they blistered and had a little bit of like brown bits on them.
Interesting.
So it's totally fine now. But I wouldn't want to go any farther. I don't want that to happen ever again.
Yeah, no, that's scary. Losing digits or losing a foot or a hand would be, God, that would be just the rough way to go. Mountain really claims you on that one. Back to the Antarctica mission real quick. Like, that seems like the next thing on your list. What does that look like? Has it been climbed? Is it technical? Talk to me a little bit about that objective.
We're still kind of hammering out the details. So maybe I don't want to talk about it.
Okay.
I kind of like
you don't need to spill it. It's fine. Yeah.
Not announce trips in advance.
Okay. That's fair. I respect that. Matthew, are you going with him?
Nah.
Not for this one?
Can't swing the vacation time.
You can't bring the kids to Antarctica? Yeah, I'm sure they make a sled or something for the little guy.
Yeah, there'd be a lot of fun. Snowman building down there probably.
Oh, well, nice guys. I mean, this is kind of like the kind of tail end of the conversation here. I think that there's just so much to cover. I think that you guys have you've done so much. There's so many objectives for anybody listening. I'll mention this at the beginning of the episode as well. Like, check out their website. Literally, there's like stories for most of the climbs that they've done, that you guys have done. And they're extensive documentary, like written stories, like in very visual, like I felt like I was there with you guys, which is really cool. So definitely check it out. It's really impossible to capture what you guys have done and the level of adventure and exploration that you guys have had in your life in a 2-hour conversation. So do you feel like, there's anything that I missed? Is there like maybe, something in the future that you guys are looking forward to that you'd like to share, or a lesson or like a life lesson that you guys feel like you'd like to share with the audience? Kind of usually how I like to kind of wrap these conversations up.
One thing I can think of is it's there are ways to visit a lot of international places that is not expensive. So we try to be as cheap as possible. Like, you can bike tour all around Europe and not pay to sleep and not pay for transportation and see a lot of places basically for free. And you can do credit card tricks and get all kinds of free flights. So it's possible you don't have to be super rich to visit all these different interesting climbing places around the world. You just have to be creative and careful about it.
So biking and credit card tricks, like what can maybe dive into that a little bit more? Like what kind of tips and tricks can you offer our people besides those two things?
If you have travel for work or for conferences, you can try to make sure that that's in an exciting location that you can get there a weekend early and leave a weekend late and do some mountains on either end. And then you got
if you can learn your own skills in advance, then you don't have to hire guides in the country. Like Mount Cook, I'm sure that'd be really expensive to hire a guide, but then we kind of learn the skills in advance and then they'll pay anything.
Now, I'd say that's a pretty technical mountain though. Like you would have to be, you can practice that out here. It would just be like a matter of really dialing in those skills.
Yeah, in Washington, there's plenty of peaks you could, if you do winter mountaineering here, that would be good preparation for Mount Cook.
That makes sense. And I think that's an important thing to share. I think it's probably like a big barrier. People are like, oh, I can't do that because it's super expensive. Like, is that like a narrative you hear a lot, or you feel like people are holding themselves back for?
I think a lot of times people are surprised how we can do all this traveling and not be like millionaires or something. But if you're extremely careful in saving your money and being careful how you get to the peaks in the country, there are generally cheap ways to do these things. Like for K2, for instance, I only paid for the permit. It was like $2,000, and people will pay like $100,000 to climb it. But if you like just buy the permit, and it's probably gotten more expensive now. But
how did you paid $2,000 for the permit and nothing else?
Well, for Broad, we paid for base camp logistics, was like a couple of $1,000 for the permit for Broad, and then to get all our gear in there. And then after we got down, we kind of made a last minute decision. Okay, we're feeling good. Can we go do K2? And the logistics guy was like, okay, yeah, just made some calls, got the permit. We like wired him the money. Like, okay, you're good to go. And that's about as cheap as you could do it. So even these big mountains, if you learn the skills in advance, like on your own, you can save a lot of money.
So you're saying like technical mountain skills in terms of like getting yourself up the mountain? Like you don't have to pay a guide to do it? Is that what you're saying?
Right. Like if there aren't ropes fixed the whole way, then if you can like get through those, like on Broad Peak, the team that was fixing the ropes, they stopped at the summit ridge at the edge, and it was still like a long ways to the summit, and all the other teams were turning around. But me and our friend, we just kind of just went, and we were comfortable in that terrain.
And you're saying, for anybody listening, you're saying you're like a WI3, I4, 510 climber with mountaineering and winter climbing experience.
Right. Yeah. And I think you need a lot more non-technical experience, like doing like 24-hour pushes, doing that a lot is is very important for like the big mountains. Breaking trail. That's what, like suffering in cold, like tolerating discomfort. That's what I say mountaineering is all about.
How about you, Matthew? Anything you felt like we missed, or any reflections you have about your journey up to this point that you'd like to share with people listening?
Nothing too big. I was just gonna share one other money-saving trick. We do a lot of stealth camping instead of staying in hotels, and that saves money. We, for example, in the Bahamas for the high point there, we ended up just camping right outside the airport, probably about 500 feet from the door in the jungle. But we told them we were going to stay in the Atlantis Hotel. in order to, check the box on the immigration form that we had an address. So we listed that as the address, but we ended up sleeping in the bushes right outside the door. So yeah, tricks like that, have saved us money and allowed us to visit more mountains in the end.
You guys ever do couch surfing?
No, we haven't.
Have you guys heard about that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I did. So I when I was 21, I flew to Turkey, Istanbul, with no plan except for going to a hostel, and I didn't have any transportation set up except for I started on my Google Maps, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna go here. And like, long story short, I this girl on the plane who lived there ended up showing me how to get to her place and stuff, and it worked out really well because I showed up to that country and I was just like, holy hell, this city is way bigger than I thought, and I have no idea where the hell I am. It was the first time international, but I ended up like, hiking, hitchhiking, bus traveling, and just like you said, stealth camping. Like I brought my tent. Like I would like, find this random hillside with a flat spot and just throw my tent down, and like there was a camping site, that was like $20 down the way per night or whatever. And everywhere else was like a hostel and stuff. And it was just like, yeah, just throw your tent down wherever you want. It's not hard to do in some places, but really easy to do in others. So it definitely, if you're crafty. What about, okay, I have an interesting question. So in these other countries, do you trust people inherently? Do you trust strangers?
I think we trust most people, except at like border crossings. Like for example, in Central America, we drove through a lot of border crossings, and there's always people trying to scam you. So the people that are asking for money, you gotta be careful. But people that there's no money involved, yeah, I generally trust.
So you're saying like if you're talking to a stranger and the topic of money comes up, then your alarms go off and your red flags go up.
Right.
Eric?
Yeah, this is one reason. So I've found in like West African and developing countries, it'll save money to hire a driver rather than trying to rent your own car, because there's so many police checkpoints in these corrupt countries that if you're just driving on your own, maybe it's not even possible to rent a car. But if you're driving on your own, you're going to get a really big fee. But if you have a local, they'll get the bribe down, and they'll also know the safe places to drive to avoid these problems. And you don't really have to worry about safety or like getting scammed. And you'll pay a little bit more for a local driver, but you'll save a lot of money in the end, and it'll be a lot safer.
But in general, you would say that most of the people on the street in the city and towns and villages that you've experienced in these very rural third world country areas, like you innately trust people and they trust you, and it's a very positive experience mostly.
Yeah, I think in general, people are friendly and trusting.
Yeah. I think it's just it's a big question mark for a lot of people, especially in the sheltered Western culture out here. We're like, oh, we're scared to travel. It's dangerous. So I think it's just an important narrative to share. Cause I felt the same, like, obviously there's moments, but like in Turkey, it was just like, everywhere I went, it's very hospitable. It's like, oh my gosh, you're traveling. It's so cool. Like, welcome to our country. Here's our hospitality. Like, this is what we do. It's like, people are generally very hospitable and welcoming and understanding. As long as you're a nice person, obviously. If you're a dick, I'm sure it wouldn't go very well.
Well, I found with bike touring, especially like in Eastern Europe, I was hitting high points, and people kind of like see that you're doing some difficult thing and they're trying to help you. So like in Moldova, I was at sunset and I was trying to look at this map and I didn't know where I was going to stop, and I was kind of looking confused. And this family kind of came over and they said, you need to sleep with us tonight. And I was like, no, I'll go camp. And they are insisting. And so they have like their own vineyard, and they give me all kinds of nice wine and like homemade honey. And it was just amazing. Like, so many friendly people help me when I'm traveling like that.
Yeah. I guess I speak to this because I've had my own, but like any like weird, uncomfortable, like slightly unsafe situations that you got yourself out of in terms of like dealing with local population?
Oh, Honduras, the taxi strike was kind of like that. Remember that, Matthew? So we had our own rental car, and we were trying to drive and get to the high point in Honduras or one of the other countries nearby. But there was some like strike from the rickshaw drivers, and so they're blocking the road. in front of us. And they said the locals they were talking to said, okay, it'd be like an 8-hour detour to get around. They like really knew where to block the road, where to cause problems. And it didn't look like we were going to get through. But then we saw this convoy of these military vehicles came in to try to break the strike. And so they came through, and the rickshaw drivers kind of inched away so the military guys could go and negotiate. And so we just tailed right behind that guy, like 6 inches behind his bumper. And the rickshaw drivers tried to close the gap right behind him. But our car was much bigger than a little rickshaw. So I just accelerated, and they just backed out of the way.
Wow.
So we got through.
Wow. Damn.
I mean, maybe what they were protesting was a valid cause, but I didn't really want to get delayed.
You're like, I got nothing to do with this. Please let me go past.
We're not responsible.
Yeah. Nice. Well, crazy guys. It's such an honor to talk to you guys. I think you guys have such a unique story, and at least to my knowledge, it doesn't seem super widespread, or people aren't like super aware of your guys' project and the things you guys are doing. So I really wanted to give you guys a chance to share your story and just let the world know kind of what you guys are up to, because it's pretty inspiring.
Oh, thanks a lot.
Yeah,
thanks for
a
making
lot.
time for us.
That concludes today's episode, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. It really means a lot to me that you're here. If you like today's episode, please be sure to rate and review the show. This simple gesture helps the algorithm to share this podcast with new listeners. Please also personally share this podcast with your friends. Word of mouth is honestly the best way to support the show. If you're psyched about what we're doing here at The Climbing Majority, please reach out. DM me via Instagram or email me at theclimbingmajoritypodcast@gmail.com. I want to hear from you. And don't forget, you can watch our full episodes on YouTube. Stay tuned for our next episode, where I sit down with a Pacific Northwest local legend, Wayne Wallace. Until then, keep exploring, stay safe, and as always, thanks for being a part of The Climbing Majority. I will see you all in 2 weeks.